Welcome, everybody. Good morning to our colleagues here in Europe, and good afternoon to our colleagues in Asia. Yeah, happy to be here today to give you, together with Andreas, the presentation about the distributed IDPS solution, which we are offering to the market and which is also a quite huge market trend, as we will see during the presentation. So today is already the second session in our IDPS webinar series. So if you missed it, feel free to invite it. To check the recording from the first webinar, which is available on YouTube, which gives an overall introduction into IDPS and the general framework before we then dig into the details. And one of the details is the distributed IDS, where we will look into today. So maybe, Andreas, you would give me the first slide. Yeah, so who's here today for your presentation? So it's me, Jan. As Jacob already mentioned, I'm lead product manager for intrusion detection prevention solutions. I'm located in Stuttgart in Germany. And I'm really passionate about IoT. I would say in particular automotive security. I'm in that topic since 2009 already. Was happy to join Ascrypt back in 2013 and really contributed as a security consultant, project manager, etc. To a lot of automotive security projects in the past. And yeah, eventually got the chance to work in the area of product management to really reuse the expertise we have in our company in terms of product. And I'm also very much happy to have Andreas today with me as the real expert on our distribution framework, IDS distribution framework, as well as our host-based IDS approach. So he's product manager and also with Ascrypt already since 2016, so really contributed to some of the today's vehicle security concepts, I would say, especially also looking into cars, which apply a lot of automated driving. Yeah, we are both from Ascrypt. So Ascrypt is likely known to you, so I keep this very short. We are in the automotive security market since 2004, really being the pioneers, I would say, in this area, having more than 400 employees in 19 locations worldwide, really give us the coverage to help our international customers on a global scale. We developed some of the industry cybersecurity leading solutions like our HSM software, which is like the market leading hardware security module software in automotive, and you find it in nearly every car, I would say, meanwhile. We are working closely with major OEMs as well as tier ones to really define the security solutions of tomorrow. So that's just to give you a little bit of background on who we are. So now let's directly jump into the presentation, what we prepared for you today. So in the beginning, I will give a short summary why you actually need an intrusion detection and prevention solution. So this will be a little bit of a recap of the first presentation on IDPS in general, but very much shortened today. So please really feel free to look into the full webinar recording. And then I will hand over directly to Andreas, who will guide us through the distributed IDS aspects of our solution here for security monitoring. And finally, we will also have a short outlook. So what's coming next actually in IDPS? And for sure, we are very much happy to have the Q&A session with you so that we can learn about all your questions in this area. And hopefully we can also provide good answers to that. Good. Why you need actually an intrusion detection and prevention solution? So there's multiple aspects why this is the case. I would say from a technical point of view and being a security engineer by heart, I would say it's simply because you need it from a technical perspective, because there's really a changing threat landscape out there. So that means we continuously see new attacks to vehicles, and we really need to think about solutions which provide lifetime protection for our vehicles. So therefore, from a technical perspective, I think there's clear arguments. But there's not only technical arguments, there's also legal arguments, and there's a lot of standardization and legislation currently ongoing in the world. And I just want to reference here to one of those standardization and legalization activities, which is the UN ECE regulation on type approval, vehicle type approval, called the UN R155. And there is a similar document, 156, which is closely related, as we will see. And this document is really interesting because the first time it gives on global level cybersecurity requirements for vehicle manufacturers. Yeah. And that's interesting because it really will also lead to, I would say, a harmonization on the market. Yeah, because now everybody really needs to look into that. Yeah. And it also clearly shows that the legal community understood that cybersecurity is not an area of research or maybe interest or an optional element. It's really mandatory to look and implement cybersecurity to build trustworthy vehicles in the future. Yeah, we have 4 disciplines basically in this UNECE, so managing vehicle cybersecurity, really to take care about the management of cybersecurity risks in a typical risk-based approach. We have the technical approach, which is telling us you should secure the vehicles by design, so to really be able to mitigate risks along the value chain. In these 2 areas, we really provide as Ascrypt consulting as well as a lot of our products. And then there's the 4th area, which is the security of the over-the-air updates, which is closely linked to the R156 regulation. And what we will focus today is basically the 3rd discipline, which is about the detection and responding to security incidents across the vehicle fleet. Why should this bother us today and not tomorrow? It should bother us today because the UNECE was adopted in 2020 and it will be effective for new vehicle types already in 2022. And even for older vehicle types where there is already a type approval, so the legacy fleets, it will be relevant from July 2024. So I would say in terms of automotive development cycles, that's really, really fast. All right, let's move on, Andreas. Yeah, let's be a little bit more specific. So what's in this UNR 155? So we here put it some sites from multiple areas in the document. So the interesting thing with this document is that it's really specific. So it doesn't stay with, okay, you should be able to detect and respond, but it really goes into the details. And we can see this, for example, to the right. There is an annex which describes typical automotive threats. So I would call this a generalized threat and risk analysis for a vehicle. There's some threats mentioned here. For example, the malicious internal CAN messages, so that somebody really injects CAN messages which are malicious or manipulates CAN messages to make them malicious. It's the unauthorized deletion manipulation of system logs, so especially if you want to hide yourself as an attacker. And it's also about denial of service. For example, here also the CAN bus is again mentioned here because everybody of us know that flooding the CAN bus is pretty simple if you have access to an ECU having access to the CAN bus. So, and many more of these threats are really described in the annex, and there's also measures described in the annex, meaning how to actually address those threats. And for example, there is the clear message, you should be able to monitor malicious internal CAN message. So in a nutshell, we could say, yes, the UNECE does not necessarily say or explicitly require IDPS. So there's no statement you need to implement an IDPS and you need to do it in that way. But the requirements in the UNECE are very hard to fulfill without that. You may get a legal argument to get across that, but it's very hard because they are quite clear, I would say. Let's come to the last slide of this introduction section. So what do we as Ascrypt now provide here to basically help you to cover the UNECE requirements and other legislation like the ones happening in China, for example, and the technical need. So we really do have a portfolio of IDS sensors, so in-vehicle IDS sensors, both for host-based IDS, so where we detect anomalies in an actual ECU, or for network IDS systems, where we detect anomalies in a network, combined with also firewall solutions, which also provide some logging. So this is really our IDS components in the vehicle. And they all need to send data to the Vehicle Security Operations Center, which we as Ascrypt also offer, and where we will have a webinar in roughly 2 weeks about it. And how we want to do this is we have developed an IDS distribution framework. It consists of an IDS manager component, IDSM, and an IDS reporter component, IDSR, and both of that components together, they basically establish the distribution framework, which is needed to collect all the anomaly information in the vehicle and eventually send them off board to the VSOC. And that's exactly what we will look into today, the IDS distribution framework. So how do these components contribute to the solution, how they are built, what you need to look into to select the right ones, etc., etc. And yeah, I'm more than happy to hand over to the real expert in this area, Andreas, to give us that information.
Thank you very much, Jan. Yes, so after this good overview from Jan on the different types of IDS and IDS components, let's have a deeper look into why the IDPS solution must be distributed. When we look at the vehicle, there are multiple goals attackers might have, right? Jan mentioned already that there is some possible threats in this UN regulation 155 in the annex, and very common attack goals are tuning, so the attackers trying to change the vehicle behavior more to their liking, or manipulations on the exhaust system to save on AdBlue. You probably know denial of service attacks and the fear that attackers might transfer ransomware attacks to the vehicles. And you surely know this attacks that have been shown by researchers where the attacker gains remote control over vehicle functionality, with the most famous being the publications from Miller and Walasek. But that is all rather still high-level goals, right? An automotive version of the attack framework from the Mitre nonprofit organization is currently developed by the Automotive Attack Special Interest Group at AutoISAC. The attack framework is well known from enterprise security and describes technical attack tactics and techniques in a standardized manner and can be a great help when developing and improving your security. It's also very useful if you want to come up with a monitoring strategy. For example, how can an attacker do initial access? Probably over some remote interface. How can we detect that? And that gives structure to our problem and makes it thus easier. As with any other security feature, we propose to use a risk-based approach also for the security monitoring and the IDPS. You should monitor the security relevant points, but also take into account what you technically can monitor. It's, for example, simply infeasible to detect all the attacks at the external interfaces. That's why we do monitoring in the first place, right? Otherwise, we would simply have prevented all attacks. It's much easier from a technical perspective to monitor multiple points to achieve a monitoring covering then all the identified attack points. So a defense in depth approach. Let's make an example. An attacker would usually try to find a vulnerability in a software. Let's say in this external interface, maybe the software is the communication protocol, maybe it's the application. And after getting access to the system over this vulnerability, he would then try to get more privileges, right? Because probably our system and applications are secured. We give them less rights, so it is harder for attackers. Probably after the privilege escalation, he would then try to persist his attack or use the current ECU for lateral movement. So in our example, he would then try to access the CAN network maybe after compromising the head unit. And we could detect the attacker on each step before he achieves his ultimate goal. Okay, so the attacker needs to move in the E architecture, access multiple ECUs. Let us have a short look on E architectures. There's very many different E architectures and every vehicle is different. What we show here is idealized simplification, of course. However, it's good to make a point. Today, we already have very different designs domain AI architectures, zonal AI architectures. We already have AI architectures with multiple vehicle computers. And since the functionality and the software of vehicles is increasing and increasing, and all the functions are more and more interconnected, right? We see more and more centralization of the functionality, even with the vision that maybe in future some functions may be performed in the cloud. But what we also see is while there is centralization, the vehicle of the future will still be a distributed system. And to be able to monitor a distributed system, you need a distributed system. How should you otherwise monitor multiple points? The question is rather on how much distributed the IDS must be, not if. And if you look at the challenges in automotive with heterogeneous systems and communication protocols, the high performance requirements, the large limits on available computing resources and memory, a distributed IDS solution can help to overcome these challenges. To make a simple example, let's say we would like to monitor some safety critical communications, since we identified that as security relevant. If we would have a single centralized IDS component, we would need to send all the communication and all additional information from the communicating systems like state information and things like that to this central point. That would use a lot of bandwidth. That is hardly feasible. With a distributed IDS system, you can monitor the critical things at the source and only must communicate the monitoring results. In addition, a distributed IDPS can help you to apply defense in depth, since as we discussed, and we can have robustness characteristics by introducing redundancy and avoid a single point of failure. Let's have a look on the distributed system. The picture already shows the currently most common deployment scenarios. We have host-based IDS on larger platforms with many interfaces, a rich operating system like Linux, QNX, things like that, right? And here we integrate sensors in the operating system. The operating systems, the rich operating systems normally already offer features to deploy a monitoring. The second very common deployment scenario is on the central gateway, where you can deploy a network IDS like our Cydia IDS CAN, which is a network IDS to monitor CAN, or Cydia IDS Ethernet if there's Ethernet. But also a firewall solution can provide security events for your overall IDS solution. Our products are what we call smart sensors. They offer a lot of different monitoring features and generally already have some built-in filters and state handling to create better security events, right? To better select what is expected and what not, at the very crucial points to monitor. In addition, what we see is that there will be essential monitoring with AUTOSAR, where you collect essential log reports like for the results for secure flashing, errors in the communication stack, and so on. And all of this information is provided by IDS sensors in the end and aggregated on the respective ECU where this information is generated or this events is generated. Then after this aggregation and additional analysis, the security events might be persisted or they might be sent to the IDS reporter to be sent to the VSOC. Let's have a look on how that works in more detail. But first, I want to make our goal explicit. What is actually what we want to do? So we want to collect and provide information relevant for attack detection and attack forensic to the security experts in the VSOC, right? And this is already two very different use cases. The detection and the forensic are very different because for detection, you need less information than to find out in the end why something did go wrong, right? And is that what the reason was? What was the steps of the attacker? So we already see that it might at first sound easy or simple, but what relevant is very difficult to decide. Anything can be relevant, really. We don't know the attack before it happened. And so with our limited available resources for memory and bandwidth, we need to find a good compromise for that. And that is really a difficult problem. Okay, and how can we tackle this technical problem? So there was the AutoSAR release last year in November 2011, and it included a number of new documents for IDS. We were also part of this AutoSAR working group and contributed with our IDS expertise and experience. The outcome is a standardization of a general architecture. So with this IDS managers and this IDS reporter, also the format, so the so-called qualified security events and the transport protocol to communicate them was defined. Qualified are the security events after they have been filtered by the IDS managers, and the IDS manager was also standardized, especially for classic. It was then taken over essentially to adaptive. In addition, a security expert tab that was defined to be able to configure the IDS. Now, does this solve all our problems? No, of course not. But the standardization of the interfaces and the syntax is a precondition to implement a distributed system, right? All the different parts of the system must be able to work together. So you need standardization. Also, a number of standardized security events for AutoSAR basis software modules were defined. The AutoSAR standard, therefore, is a very good basis for the introduction of IDS into the vehicle. But in the end, there will be also a lot of tailoring, right? We will employ the smart sensors on crucial points, and we must decide, for example, here there's a large field that says context data. But what is the context data? What is the relevant data? That is not defined intentionally because it might be very different for different security events. And then there's the question, even if you know this information that you want to put in there, how do you format that? How is the VSOC then parsing that? And all of these questions you need to answer when you implement your solution in the end. Let us have a look at additional requirements we encountered. This slide shows the Cycure IDS manager for deeply embedded ECUs from us. The green box is essentially the IDSM as specified in AutoSAR, and our whole Cycure IDS manager is also compliant to AutoSAR. In addition, we found that there was requirements for additional filters. So we added the possibility to simply extend the filter chain. We also got many different requirements for persistent and reporting strategies. For example, to store different kinds of counters, to have specific buckets in the NVM for different kinds of events, depending on the event type, depending on event severity, to send a regular heartbeat, to indicate the IDS is running and the general security status, to have a end-to-end encryption, and so on. That's why we developed a plugin which we call QSEF handler to be and realize over an additional sync essentially to realize this kind of tailoring problems. So do you remember the attack example from the start? Let's have a look at that again. As we discussed, attacks have different stages and steps, and attackers use different tactics and techniques to achieve their goals. So we have established it's difficult to detect an attack at one point. At the moment, we do the aggregation on a single ECU, right? So that helps us with limiting the resources that we need. But what we really need to detect such distributed attacks, right? Because also the attack is distributed, is what we call global aggregation. So the aggregation and filtering on one ECU we call local aggregation. And we then have the concept of global aggregation, where we aggregate over multiple ECUs for a domain, a zone, for the complete vehicle, right? So we can have essentially, if there's multiple events in the vehicle, we can maybe already decide that there's an attack. Similar, if we look at the aggregation methods, if we look at the current standard, in AUTOSAR, there's filters. It even says filters. Like you take only every end security event and forward that or store that. But if you look in more detail on the IDS, what IDS filter and aggregation and analysis techniques exist, you see that it's only essentially one kind of technique. There's multiple more. And essentially, they help you to decide what is relevant information, what is maybe only a false positive. Can I be sure that something is an attack and that it is therefore more important to report this to the VSOC? All of this can be better decided with global aggregation and additional analysis and aggregation techniques. This is why essentially we have two different product variants for the Cyger IDS Manager. We have the Cyger IDS Manager for the deeply embedded ECUs, that where I shown the architecture. There you may need some additional filters, but generally don't need this complex aggregation and analysis techniques on all ECUs. But we need it on the high performance ECUs, where we might have a host-based IDS and where we might want to do aggregation for a zone, domain, or the vehicle. In the end, we still have all our products compliant to AUTOSAR, so the events look all the same, to be able to plug them in, right? So that they can work together. Because how should they otherwise work together? We didn't talk much about the Cyger IDS reporter. Maybe I can also say something to that. It's similar with this discussion over the manager components. We are limited by our scenario, right? And there is probably already online connection, some kind of backend systems where there's data transferred from the vehicle. So usually there is already some kind of data transfer. And normally you don't want to then build another connection, since that is also creating overhead and more resources are needed, but you want to integrate in the existing connection, then terminate there on the backend on some initial server, and then route the information wherever it is necessary. So this is why the Cyger IDS reporter is normally integrating in an existing connection. You might think, why don't we send simply all of this information to the backend and do this more complex filtering and analysis in the VSOC, right? We could do that, technically possible. The reason is also, again, this limitations on the bandwidth. We also have a limited bandwidth to the backend, not only in the vehicle, right? It's not a cable-bound connection to the VSOC, but it's a wireless network. It goes over wireless networks, and the bandwidth is costing money. Mostly the OEM currently is paying for that, but there's also different approaches for that. And all the information that we send that is not relevant is simply wasted, right? And if we have a more complex analysis possibilities and the possibility to already decide in the vehicle whether something is relevant or not, that is a very good thing. Also, if we want to be faster to react on it in the future. Let's just have a look at the future, actually. So there's a picture of a zonal EE architecture, since we didn't have that in the beginning. And what we will see is essentially that we will have many different IDPS components, so more of the IDPS sensors that we call smart sensors on the crucial points on the central gateway, for example, here. And we have more and more of the components then supporting this essential information gathering to have an overall overview also of the vehicle. What can we see in addition to more IDS components in the future, and how will this topic develop? So of course, if we have more IDPS components, we can start exploiting all this distributed system properties. If you only have a few or only two components, it's hardly a distributed system. We already shown this analysis and aggregation techniques, and we support already a large variety of techniques in our Cyger IDS manager variant for this high performance ECUs. And we expect that more and more filtering will be done in the vehicle, right? The network traffic and the systems will increase, and so will the possibility to analyze all this information and security relevant data in the vehicle. Also, we expect that the reporting strategies will be optimized, since this is costing money, right? When to send what is very important. And there we also come to forensic and analysis support. When the OEMs have established their VSOCs and have gained more experience with that, we will get a lot more requirements for forensic and dynamic information generation on demand. So if the security analyst in the VSOC then says, yes, this is an interesting or relevant thing, I need to look into that more, we will need to be able to generate information dynamically for that. But we will also see reactions to the detected events in the vehicle directly and from the VSOC, so IDPS. We already can do that for the straightforward cases with firewalls and the like to drop packets. And we will see more of that in the future, in particular with the advent of automatic driving. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive and now understand why a distributed IDPS is an integral part of an IDPS solution. Let me hand over to Jan again for the conclusion.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas, for taking us into all the details of a distributed IDS approach. I think it's pretty clear, yeah, and obvious. If you have multiple IDS sources in a car, you need to combine them to make the best use out of it. And having the best solution for that will really ease your life. And we are more than happy to offer here really good solution. Yeah, so let's conclude here. Why is all this important? So I mentioned it in the beginning. There is a changing threat landscape. So really the cybersecurity which we see today is not the cybersecurity which we will see tomorrow. So there will be new attacks. The attackers will continuously evolve their attack portfolio, I would say. So, and also new vulnerabilities will be discovered in our systems, which we know today. So we really need to consequently prepare for that scenario from a technical point of view. And that includes that we really monitor what's happening. Also, that is now covered in mandatory regulations. So I mentioned the UN regulation R155, but also the ISO standard is on the way, which is just describing how you do the security process. But if you do this in a good manner, I think you will easily end up at very similar requirements, actually. And then finally, what we have not covered today, but what is really prevalent is also a lot of standardization in legislation, for example, in China. So therefore, there's a clear need for IDPS, intrusion detection prevention solution, including the distribution aspect. And our offering here is really the continuous protection cycle, which you see to the right, really being able to monitor and detect, analyze and respond, and then make the system again capable to prevent itself against any known attacks again. And yeah, this end-to-end chain is really available from us. You can also have individual components. That's absolutely feasible because it's really building blocks which can be combined. But we are also really happy to provide this end-to-end solution to OEMs as well as fleet providers as well as their suppliers. Please click, Andreas. Yeah, what we saw today was really a deep dive into the distributed IDS aspect. I would like to point to some further information. So the one is our white paper, which is summarizing our view on IDS or IDPS in total, with the comparison to the immune system for human bodies versus the immune system for a connected fleet. I think it's a nice read for your next ride in a train or plane. Concerning the distributed aspect, we also have a flyer, which is, let's say, really covering the holistic and AUTOSAR compliant solution. You can find that on our webpage, as well as you find on BoschTube the recording of this first webinar on IDPS. Also, there's more coming. So we will have the next webinar on our Vehicle Security Operations Center. So Jens Gram will join me to present that on October 26th and October 28th. Again, we will have a session in the morning and the afternoon to really address the worldwide audience. And we will conclude all this webinar series with number 4 and look into SecureGate, our Ethernet firewall, as well as the prevention technologies which are upcoming here. Again, Andreas will be with us, supported by Sid Shukla, and we are very much happy if you join us in this further journey on IDPS technologies. But for today, that's what we prepared for you. Goodbye. Thank you.